let's go to what is the simulation. So what we've done with Carlos's help and Annie's help is to create a simulation. Now you might, when I say the word simulation, you probably have the notion that you sit in front of a computer and you pull some buttons and tabs and you see some things happen like a flight simulator. That is not what we mean. Nor do we mean that we're going to do something like a virtual sim city where we build a city and see the consequences of it and it's all sort of visual graphic displayed. And we also don't mean virtual reality, by the way. That doesn't help very much. What we mean instead is a very group-centric activity where it is computer-driven, and it's interactive, it's group-paced, and it's peer learning. Something we find this younger group is so excited about because they're learning from each other and trading secrets of what they've heard. What a mentor or boss has said to them, how they've said it, what they've said about it, and that discussion and debate is what is so exciting and engaging in this one. It's real events. Every one of these scenarios that we've used comes from a client, and in fact, in many cases, come from about 10 clients simultaneously. And there are real consequences. The choices that you make here are not obviously one or the other, but they do have real consequences for you. Because one group is against another, that adds a little bit of fun. And it's very much in a go-do focused kind of way, meaning when you leave this, there's something that you need to go do. And so that turns it into an action and an immediate applicability. All right, so with that, what we thought is that we give you a taster of what all of this looks like. So before I do that, let me say, how do you win? And we do that with 5 gauges. There are 5 metrics here that we use, and these are the 5. We're going to minimize the use of our extra time. So we have a little bit of marginal time and we want to not try to use all of it so that we're not overloaded. We want to manage the workload so that we're not doing too much, and that's going to affect time, of course. We have to maximize stakeholders' opinions, and we need to maximize our promotion readiness so people see us as being ready for another opportunity. And of course, we want to maximize business impact. So there you go. Those are the 5 things, and we're going to do this in this simulation. In effect, we're trying to balance the time that's expended against the results that you get. And we're going to do this in the simulation by a little graphic that you see at the bottom that has all 5 of those gauges, and you'll see that it's a little line. We start with some time, and it's going to decrement, and each of the other 4 are going to go up. And we'd like the last 3 to go up a lot, and the workload to not go up too much. It's the simple answer for all of it. So if that's how you win, at least in this simulation, let's give it a go. So in this, we have the world of Sabrina, and we're going to give you one of the scenarios just to get your reaction and to see what you think about the simulation. So here we go. There's pre-work to this, so we would do this in advance, but today I'm going to introduce it to you right here. So Sabrina just took a new global role. She utilizes her expertise and forces her to now interact with a global team, and she's now responsible for a large project and all of its day-to-day operations. And the intent is to put her in a role that most of you and most of our participants can identify with. A big opportunity to show what she's capable of doing, but largely still a doing, executing role as opposed to a strategic, purely thinking role. All right, now on the positive side, we're going to say about Sabrina, just so you can kind of get a sense of her and relate to her, is like many of us, she likes to be in control and she's very organized. She's ambitious, like many of us. She's very smart and well-educated. She's also pretty friendly and gregarious and doesn't necessarily like to be the center of attention, like many of us. And she was first in her class at university, like many of you. I'm not going to claim credit for that one, on the positive side. And on the areas for development, she really prefers for her work to speak for itself. Again, something we find from a lot of women around the world that we talk to. They don't want to do the self-promotion and the politics that go with it. She can be quite determined. Some around her would say she's stubborn at times. I'm sure a few of us have been accused of that over time. She's not a great public speaker. It's not that she is going to avoid it and can't do it. She just doesn't like it. So she's going to avoid it if she can. She prefers that direct communication rather than being so diplomatic where you have never really said anything clearly, and like many of us, can be a bit of a perfectionist. So this is just to give you a sense of the character that we have defined as Sabrina. Now, as we do this next piece, I don't want you to do what you think Sabrina should do. I want you to choose what you would do if you were in her role, meaning you have a new global role, it's utilizing your expertise, you're interacting with a global team that you don't own, by the way, and you're responsible for the project and all of its day-to-day operations. So I hope that's clear. All right, the first thing you need to do is you need to make some investments in yourself. We have a bunch of these. A bunch of these, as you see there, and you see the graphics that go with it, is a little more than anybody can do in practice. So let me simplify that, and I'm going to narrow it down to four of the interesting ones. So first, there's this thing that we call pay it forward. And this is where you see that your boss is overwhelmed, so you step up and do things for your boss largely without asking. And it's kind of that, I noticed you didn't get around to doing this PowerPoint that's coming up in the next week, and so I started a draft for you. It's those kind of things where you try to do everything you can to pay it forward for your boss without being explicitly asked to do it. The second one is this develop a mentor relationship. It starts with signing up with a mentoring program because that's how many people get started, especially in these mid-level years. And then you're going to make the effort to meet two people and pick one that you're going to decide to invest time in. And that might mean another meeting or two until you feel like there's enough rapport that this person can be an effective mentor for you. But it's still in the early stages. It's a development. Improves by public speaking. You know, a lot of us feel that public speaking is going to help us be a better profile raiser of our own, or a better candidate for a senior position, or better at our job. And many people are now giving the advice that you should take a Toastmasters class. It's actually a brilliant strategy, and it works really, really well for many, many people. So that's an investment you can make. And then the last one is for all of my L&D colleagues, you know, and for us, because this is what we do, you decide to invest in going to a training class that you've been invited to and meeting with peers in that training program. Now, this training program is going to take 6 months, so it's a bit of commitment of time, and it's only worth it if you make an effort to say, how am I going to use that training to my advantage? Okay, so 4 options there for you. And what I want to know is, which one of those do you think is most interesting, and why? And before I ask you to vote on them, I'd like to hear comments from people. So if you would please open your chat and pop in which one you're voting for and why. And you can just use the tag word like forward or speaking or mentor or training, and tell me why. And we want to know in chat what you're thinking. Which one of those do you think is worth investing time in if you were in this job and it was you, not Sabrina? So obviously we would say all 4 of these are good things to do. But the reality of a job is you have limited hours to invest. So the whole principle about these investments is I've got this broad array that's offered by the organization and by myself of things that I could do, but I have to choose. And which ones I choose are going to set up opportunities and create limitations as we go forward, just like is in real life. So for the fun of this, I'm going to open up a polling question here. You actually vote. I mean, I'm curious which one really wins in this one. Looks like what we find when we're doing this with younger women is that the #1 winning vote is improved public speaking of the 4, followed probably second by developing a mentor relationship. Very rarely does pay it forward, as Annie said, become a big deal for them. They don't even see why that would make a difference. And very rarely do they understand how to take advantage of training in a way that really pays off for them. So this is something we can do as we're advertising to help them understand what it means and why it means. But I'm encouraged that all of you see the value of training and the value of paying it forward with your manager. Okay, so now you've made some choices about how you're going to invest in your relationships. So let's go forward and actually look at one of the scenarios and see what you think. So I've done that part. And here's the scenarios. We have this in 2 rounds. We only have 5 in the round 1, and the way the simulation works in practice is that the group would now go launching off to do it all by themselves, and they would self-pace through, and they'd have a very lively debate about what to do and why to do it and how to do it. What we're going to do here is just pick one, which is the first one, this extracurricular tasks. So you know the formula. You got a full demanding job. There's a lot of stuff going on simultaneously. And here you are being asked to do some additional work. So you recently attended a program where people were talking about women having a tendency to do work that really has low strategic value, what one of my colleagues in the UK has called organizational dusting. So now often these are the necessary tasks that have to be done, but women tend to volunteer and men tend to overlook that work or not think it's important. And these tasks can range from organizing transportation to proofing client documents. And after attending this program, you realize that the more work you do that is non-value add, the less time you have for strategic value add and higher profile tasks. So the next day after this program, Carl, who's your boss's boss, asked if you would be willing to organize the next cycle of summer interns. And this is going to require a significant amount of time during the summer. And you're wondering whether you should say yes or no. And the question for you and for everybody on the line and for your group, if you were sitting in the room, is what do you do? And we're going to give you 3 choices. Choice number 1 is, yes, I love this. And because you believe this is going to build your reputation as a leader, and this is a test that shows people what you can do. And if you manage this well, you'll show that you can take on more work. Right? And you don't want to say no to your boss's boss. So that's option A, yes. Option B, no. I've said yes to too many of these kinds of things, and I'm now going to protect my time. So you say no because you believe this work will not be recognized. You believe this effort will distract you from more strategic, higher visibility responsibilities, and it's another form of organizational dusting, and it won't show up, by the way, in your year-end evaluation, or in your promotion readiness, or. So no, finally have the courage to say no. And option C is the hybrid strategy. Yes, but. You say yes because you think this is good for your reputation and it can show what you want to do. However, there's a lot of time involved, and so you request to share the co-leadership with a colleague who happens to be a good friend, somebody you know. So you think that that will be a lot of fun and that you're going to really enjoy working with her. So you have 3 options here. Yes, I love it. No, this is a waste of time. Or yes, but I want to co-lead it. So again, just as before, I'd like to hear comments. So pop up in the chat session and tell me kind of what you think you vote for, A, B, or C, and why. At least this one is getting lively commentary and all over the board. Oh, I love all the comments that are showing up there, like extra work alone is hard to do. A lot of you are saying that it shows leadership, but you want to share it. And many of you have said A is important for the future of the organization. So there's a whole range of responses. That most people prefer to share the work because it seems like that's a safer bet, right? And a lot of people say, I know I should say no, but I'm not going to say no because I'm not good at saying no. And the second obvious one is to say yes. So interesting that that shows up here. Well, so let us show you what we think of those choices. And the more important thing is not what's the right answer. The more important thing is, how do you know which one is a good choice and when? And let me explain this to you in the following way. So let's look at consequence C. What typically happens when you try to share work with somebody is that it turns out that it takes a lot more time than anybody had thought it would take. And then frequently your partner ends up letting you down because, for good reasons, they get overloaded, they don't have enough time. And so you end up then doing the lion's share of the work, the extra work of the coordination, and now you have to share the credit for it. So as much as consequence C looks good because it looks like you're being collaborative and it looks like it would be fun, our comment to you about C is, if it's worth it for the visibility and for the organization's long-term consequences, do it and get the credit for it, rather than just default to let me share. because sharing is not always easier. And I'm going to do this by way of a story. A young woman that I worked with a number of years ago, who's in London, decided that she would take advantage of her company allowing for a job sharing. It sounds like a great thing, particularly as both of them were young mothers, and it seemed like it was a wonderful story, opportunity to go forward. I am certain that they both spent 33% more time just trying to stay coordinated with each other. And they had very different styles in working. So what one wanted, what seemed a natural way to do something for one was not a natural way to do the other one. They both ended up hating the job, and by the way, not doing a brilliant job of it because the coordination was just burdensome. And it's those kind of stories that have inspired Consequence C. So lest you think that saying no is a really good idea, we're not sure. Because if you've been arguing for Will and Carl, Will is your immediate boss and Carl is your boss's boss, that you're ready to take the next step and you're now unwilling to take on additional responsibilities, it starts to send a really mixed message. And I often believe for women who are not in formal leadership positions that some of this extracurricular stuff is how you really show your capability to lead. But that said, I don't want to say that you should say yes to absolutely everything that comes across your desk, because that's foolhardy. Rather, I would have you say, how would you know if this is an occasion that you should say no? And I'll give you a hint. If you've done a lot of pay it forward, for example, you have more leverage to say to Will and Carl, I'm overloaded and this isn't a time for me to do it. I will do a bad job of it. So that's a thing to think about. You don't realize often how some of those investments now should start to pay off at this moment in time. If you haven't done a lot of pay it forward, then I can imagine Will and Carl are saying, really, what's this about? One of the things that we encourage you to think about is when you're trying to say, do I say yes or no, is to ask yourself the question, how do I know if this is an important effort or not? Carl's the senior manager here. Does Carl care about it? And some things I'd encourage you to say is, well, does Carl show up for the intern events? Does Carl talk about the interns and the importance of the summer interns? Does Carl get to know the summer interns? Who was it that did those summer interns last year and what's happened to their career? Are they seen as on a good track? Just ask yourself some questions before you choose to say yes or no. And if you find that Carl doesn't care, then you probably should say no. And then you've got to do something else to kind of boost your readiness, and that's where your investments come back as a strategy. In this particular case, we happen to believe that A also has some consequences because it's going to take a huge amount of time and, it's going to take away from your other priorities. So you've got to get prepared to negotiate that. So again, if you're going to say yes, because you think this is a good opportunity, because people care about it, because Carl is noticing, because it's a good track record, then I want you to think hard about what are you going to let go of, or what are you going to negotiate, or how are you going to set priorities to make sure that you're delivering what people are expecting of you. Okay, so let me pause and see if there are any questions or comments